Our eastbound routing is track 2, and we go from the Summit Tunnel down track 1. So we will go through the Auburn station. Now that can always change. The dispatcher could have a reason to take us the other way. And also to Kurt Clark. So I'm gonna hand the microphone, and they're gonna tell you what it's like.
Well, it takes a lot of, I guess where do I start? There's a lot of regulatory things that you have to go through, the rules training, and I've gone through all the stuff that a regular locomotive engineer out of the system goes through, with running regular diesel locomotives, large freight trains, DP trains, and then on top of that, you have to have experience as a fireman on the locomotive itself, so that as an engineer, you're careful to observe what the fireman's doing and what the fireman's able to do and their capabilities and how the engine is running, so that you can either back out of the throttle or, yeah, we can go ahead and work up this hill at this particular speed. And you can tell when they're getting into trouble so that the rest of you don't get into trouble. The engineer is responsible for the fireman as well. So you got to know that fireman side very well. I've been on the crew for 14 years now, and you know, rebuilding the locomotives, I know it inside and out, up and down, left and right. And it's just, I would say for a steam locomotive, it's a lot of experience, you know, and knowing what valve does what and when to know when the machine is telling you what it wants. And you have to have that sort of sixth sense to be able to know how to run it and get the most out of the machine.
This one here is for Kurt or Jimmy. What are the challenges for a fireman in terms of oil and water going over on a path? What do you anticipate some of the challenges might be?
I guess the challenges would be, you know, it's a partnership. Whatever the engineer is doing over there, you have to compensate for over on the other side. And also with a grade like that, you know, you need to have your water level where it needs to be to make sure that the crown sheet and everything has enough water where it needs to be, and you got to be able to anticipate throttle changes and just make sure that you know, you're firing the locomotive correctly for the grade to be working quite a bit. You know. So it's basically just a partnership with the engineer. You have to work together as a team and do it so you get over the hill.
Is it normal to lift relief valves when you're on the run?
Is it normal to lift relief valves when you're on the run?
His question was, is it normal to see the safety valves lifting? Yes. By regulation, we're required to test them every day, so you'll at least see them do that once. A steam locomotive, we carry the water with us. We don't want to waste water, so we won't pop the engine unnecessarily, but sometimes it does happen. A real quick, I wanted to follow up on the training. So these guys know this locomotive very well, and it's only natural that who do we want to operate the locomotive? Those that work on it, those that know it, those that have the skill sets, the passion, and the knowledge. So that's how it works. Jimmy, would you just take a moment and share a few experiences with your firing, just as a follow-up to Kurt's question?
And Jimmy, you can also answer, how long does it take for you to steam it up in the morning and get it ready to run?
So when we come on duty about 3 hours before departure time, it's normally about 150 pounds of pressure, about 2/3 of glass, upper glass of water. And basically we light the engine on a small spot fire and bring it back up to full operating temperature and pressure. And then basically as a fireman in training right now, transitioning to the operating side, and it's a really neat opportunity, just managing the left side of the locomotive, working with the engineer, and it's a really awesome opportunity.
I have a question right here, sir.
Is this engine built for a special reason, a special job?
His question was the big boy built for a special purpose? Yes, it was. Steam locomotives were built, they were purpose built, unlike the locomotives we have today that are designed to fit a variety of different uses. The big boys were designed to carry eastbound tonnage from Ogden. For those of you who have read all of the fine books written about the big boy, namely the Bill Prattville's book, The Big Boy. It goes into great detail about the challenges that the UP faced. And they're similar challenges that we have today, and the solution to the challenge is a big locomotive that can physically carry more cars, carry more tonnage faster. So that's why the big boy was built.
How hot does it get up in the cab?
How hot does it get up in the cab? Well, I'm going to hand the microphone over to these guys.
Real hot. Yeah, the heat in the cab is pretty well inescapable, especially yesterday. You got that breeze coming back at you, and it's carrying a lot of heat coming off the firebox right up into the window. It's like, you know, if you were out here today and you had your hair dryer and you're just blowing it in your face constantly, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, it gets super hot. Stick your head in the oven for a while, I guess. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, it gets real hot. 2 days ago when we came across northern Nevada coming into Portola, man, it was 117 outside, and inside it was 140 degrees in the cab. And you just sit there and you're putting ice packs down your neck, down your back, just trying to stay cool, and it's just, there's no way escaping. You just stay in there and keep fighting and keep building water, keep making steam, keep going down the track.
So how fast do you drive it? How fast does it go?
How fast does the big boy go? That's a question that captures everyone's imagination. There's a lot on Wikipedia which is not accurate. The locomotive would probably run 80 miles an hour if you were to drop it off of a mountain. It really is not designed to run that fast. The Union Pacific operated these things roughly around 55 miles an hour. I've had it to 60, we've all ran it to 60, 55 every now and then. With a 68-inch driver and the size and the design of the connecting rods, the pistons, the valve gear, the counterweight to accommodate that 68-inch wheel diameter, it's very large. It's no exaggeration. Looking at it right here, it's two 484s. So it's two 844s, it really is. So with all of that mechanism, it's just not designed to run fast. 45 miles an hour, it loves 40. We like to run it at 40. It works really well. So that's a good question.
Is this the ultimate manifestation of steam locomotive technology? In other words, are there any larger ones on the board, designing boards?
If I'm hearing your question, I'll just summarize it. State-of-the-art technology, 1941. Without inviting the usual discussion about which locomotive was bigger, heavier, powerful, faster, there is a lot of interest in locomotives, and everyone has their favorite, and their favorite, of course, would not be eclipsed by the big boy. But I will tell you, for those of us that work on it, there are a few locomotives that can produce the power and apply that power to tractive force and horsepower, and that's really how locomotives are rated. The physical weight of the locomotive, 300 psi, that is a lot of power. When the Union Pacific was designing these locomotives, they had a very specific purpose behind them: efficiency, economy, speed, power, reliability, and it needs to spend its time out pulling freight. It can't be in the shop all the time. So all of the technology you see there is well thought and years of experience and testing that went into this class of locomotives, the Challengers and the 800s.
One more question here. John, I know the steam team and everybody's interested in the engineers and the locomotives, but can you talk a little bit about what you do in operational stops and what you do to the machine?
So summarize a question for John Stravino, what it's like working in your role, what it's like servicing the locomotive and serving your apprenticeship on the crew. Here's John Stravino.
Well, the locomotive needs to be lubricated, so when we come to a service stop, they're very well planned, and we do what's called doping the rods. We take a very heavy stick grease, and we with what's called an alumite gun, and we force it into the rods with about 20,000 psi that dope gun is producing, or capable of producing. And we also have to add oil to the lubricators. There's valve oil, which is for all your points on the locomotive that see high temperature steam and high heat, and then there's engine oil, which see lighter temperatures. And then we also look around and we're looking for loose bolts, anything that's not right, so we can make a correction.
Anybody else, sir?
The 4015 tender, when do you expect to get it? How's the exchange going to be made? Is UP supplying some of the parts? And now that you're running PTC, you got new ideas for modifications?
The question we frequently get is about the 4014 tender versus the 4015 tender, the 3985 tender. There are more to come on that project, but right now there's that project is essentially still in process. Good question. Sir in the white hat.
What's your estimated departure time from Roseville?
Well, we will be departing here Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So if you're interested in following us, you can go to upsteam.com. We have a GPS tracker. Sometimes that tracker is intermittent, and that's only because of satellite technology and other things. But the full schedule is there, along with the very important safety message. How many feet back would we like everybody to stand? 25 feet back. We also ask that you please never, ever take a selfie or any kind of videography or still photography within 25 feet of the locomotive. We do not want to see that. And the reason is it's very dangerous. It's easy to lose your situational awareness. Sometimes you're next to another track that you're so focused on the big boy you don't realize you're in danger. So 25 feet back, and we're very serious about that. We will not be smiling at you if you are too close to the track, and the reason is because it's for your own safety. So please share that message.
I noticed that the drive wheels down at the track level, you have oilers for each wheel. What is the purpose of the oilers?
His question was, we have flange oilers on the drivers. Well, we have flange oilers because this locomotive is a special machine that we care for. We want it to operate for many years. We are the team that's responsible for maintaining it. We want to get our maximum mileage out of those drivers before we have to turn them. We were coming down 25 mile an hour Feather River Canyon, countless left and right turns, those flanges squealing, doing what they do on a railroad. So that's the purpose of the flange oilers, to protect the locomotive and care for it. Make sure it's around for future generations.
Ed, you ran the initial part of the trip without a diesel engine. Can you tell me how that was and why you have a diesel engine on?
Yes, a very popular question is about the diesel locomotive. I know that from a photography standpoint, there's something about having a diesel behind a steam locomotive that is just really troublesome for people. But remember that this is a logistical problem. Logistical solution is that we run our machine the way we need to run it. The locomotive has standalone PTC, which allows us to run it all by itself. It's no longer tethered and hardwired to the computer system on a trailing locomotive. But we operate the locomotive the way that we need to suit the conditions of our business. And that means sometimes we don't have a diesel locomotive with us. A lot of the times we do. We have a diesel locomotive here to help us with the ascent up a 2% grade. These locomotives operated up about a maybe 1.6 up out of Ogden and up out of Cheyenne. So a 2% grade is a pretty good hill. The length of the boiler, the water level in there, the water glasses, the position of the turret pipe up in the dome, there's a lot of logistics that goes into that. The other side of this is going down a 2% grade. For those that know what a 2% grade is, it's actually over 2%, 2.2. So for every 100 feet, the locomotive is rising 2 feet in the air. That's 24 inches, almost 28 inches. Think about that. That's a lot of power, that's a lot of fuel, that's a lot of water. So we want to not grind the brakes off of those beautiful passenger cars, so we're just preserving our resources. And the trip out of Cheyenne went very good. Sir?
How much will you replace on the 4014 after you get back to Cheyenne after this trip?
His question was, how much will we replace? And there's not a lot to replace. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Austin. He can tell you about what goes into all of the work that Jimmy, that all of us do, John, Kurt, Garland. There's a lot of work that goes into caring for this locomotive. Austin will tell us all about it.
So when we get back from a trip like this, What's required is a 31-day inspection. That's an FRA requirement. And then after every season, we'll do an annual inspection. So the 31-day inspection, we're not really replacing parts. We're washing the boiler. We're doing inspections. An annual inspection, we're required to remove the drawbars and drawbar pins and do those inspections. But realistically, unless there's a part that has failed, which is pretty rare because these are well-built machines, very well-built machines, we don't replace big hardware on this machine. It's more or less just cleaning, taking it apart, laying it up. One of the worst things you can do for these things is just let them sit. And so we take a lot of time to get all the water out of all the little piping and all the valves that are on this, so it's not just sitting in there in between trips. We'll probably pull the valve heads, make sure that there's no standing water in there. We open the throttle, we lay up the superheater units. You know, those are pretty, I guess, cantankerous items that need to be laid up in a certain way so you don't have any problems. They're always under oil pressure at any given time. So, yeah, it's a great machine, but it requires just a lot of maintenance and layup and then startup when we go to run the trip.
When we have the locomotive, when we get it ready after all of our layup, when we travel on a trip like this, we have, by regulation, 31 service days to operate the locomotive. If we're going to be out, such as the next trip, we're going to be out for 57 days. Sometimes we're out a little bit over 31. So we cannot afford to steam the locomotive up a few days in advance. So we have to steam it up and go. In order to do that, we do all the things that Austin mentioned. And it's a beautiful thing when this locomotive, we steam it up for the first time, and we literally leave and we take off to go on a 3,000-mile trip to see all of you.
From a cold start, how long does it take to get it up to steam to run it?
From a cold start, in the old days, they would steam these things up in a matter of hours. Well, we take days. We take days because it's big. We care for it in a way that you would expect us to, given its status as a public relations ambassador. We steam it up. It's always hot. We do not let it sit around cold and wet. That will destroy a locomotive in short order. So it takes us 4 days to steam the locomotive up.
After you pass Newcastle, would be on the south track or the north track?
Pass through what location?
Newcastle. After you pass Newcastle, are you going to be on the north track or the south track?
Well, I don't know the route that well. All I can tell you is that it will be on track 2. So if you look at upc.com, we have the route, and we have the route highlighted, which is track 2. Now, as I said, I'll say it again, be prepared in the event there is an operational need for us to go another way. We could go up track 1. Track 1 is steeper. All the eastbound tonnage goes over the preferred lighter grade, which is track 2. Once we get to the Summit Tunnel, then we're down track 1. So more to come on that, upsteam.com. Very good question. His question was, for the guys running this locomotive today, we're younger guys. I'm not so young anymore, but I was younger at one time. I apprenticed under guys that had worked on the Southern Pacific, Denver and Salt Lake, Santa Fe, and Missouri Pacific. They were in their 70s when I worked with them. It was a privilege and an honor. You serve an apprenticeship. These guys have talked about the apprenticeship that they're serving. Just like in the old days, it would take generally about 3 years of a progressive examination process to become a locomotive engineer. Today, a locomotive engineer is a process that usually takes around 6 to 10 months. I want to hand the microphone again over to Austin, and just to kind of put a fine point on that, what it takes to be an engineer, and he'll add a little bit more to what he's already said.
So, like as I had said before, you know, and Ed mentioned, a locomotive engineer nowadays is 6 to 10 months, and that's on a regular diesel locomotive. Any engineer that gets up on that diesel locomotive, it doesn't matter, you know, their experience level, you can still get the same amount of pull forward with every notch that every other engineer can get. With a steam locomotive, it's a lot more organic, would be the best way to describe it. And it's more of a partnership between man and machine to get that to do what you need it to do. And that's why there's a lot longer apprenticeship to become a steam locomotive engineer.
In many respects, I like to compare it to a fighter pilot or an airline pilot. The responsibilities of running this locomotive on a network, you're not running it on a slow railroad where there's not a lot of interaction with other trains or people. All the train traffic and everything that we interact with, the speed restrictions, all of the various things that you can imagine you experience require a level of attention and focus and detail. And the last thing that you want to worry about is the physical mechanism. So that has to become a nuanced art, feel. It literally is a seat of your pants, running the locomotive with an old-fashioned Timex wristwatch on my hand, and that's the skill that these men are developing. And it comes from years, and they know the locomotive well, and they also have a passion for it. The heat and the level of work that is required on this locomotive, it looks fun. People say you have the best job in the world, and we do, but that comes with a tremendous amount of work. And this isn't a job for everyone. You're not going to sign up on the crew and just go have fun and wave at people. Look at the dirty clothing. You know, this is this is 1940s, and as they said, that 140, 150 degrees in that cab. Robin can attest. Robin rides up there with us. So, thank you for your question.
Is the whistle original to the steam engine, and what have you done to preserve it?
Is the whistle new or original? So that's another question we get all the time. And remember that this locomotive was one of 25. There was nothing special about it. It was a number. They bought 25 of these. This was part of the first group of 20. The whistles were bought by manufacturers just like the headlight, the bell, and all the other little accoutrements on the locomotive. When the Union Pacific donated the locomotive, they received a request from the Southern California chapter of the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society. The Union Pacific reached out with a switch engine and grabbed the next engine in line, which was going to be scrapped, and that was this one. They very graciously cared for it, they painted it up, and they put parts on it. They reached into the supply room that had dozens, and if not hundreds, of whistles and bells and headlights, and they put it together, painted it up, and they shipped it to California. So the whistle is not assigned to the locomotive, it just happens to be one. When we got the locomotive from them, they had connected it to an air source and they were blowing it. For those who had seen the locomotive in California, you probably had an opportunity to blow that whistle. Well, that's the same whistle that it was delivered in 1961. We haven't done anything to it other than maybe file a few little edges. There's a few little tricks you can do to make the whistle tune a little bit, but other than that, it's the same thing.
How long does it take to build one of these? Is it all built in one factory, or do they farm things out?
How long did it take them to build this? And I'm going to guess just a little bit, but we're talking a matter of maybe a month or so. And it was built in an assembly line fashion in a massive industrial facility in Schenectady, New York. A really cool company name, American Locomotive Company, ALCO. They were building Sherman tanks alongside these things. There was a massive assembly line. The shop complex was just enormous and huge. They were building all the different components that came from other suppliers. General Steel Castings in Granite City, Illinois, made the wheels, made the engine beds. Many other suppliers made different parts. They made the boilers themselves, and they put it all together right there.
You're going over through a lot of historical sites and geographies, from the Feather River Canyon to Donner Pass. What are you looking forward to the most on this trip?
We're going over some really historical parts of the railroad, so I want to hand the microphone off and everyone can tell us about what is going to be excited and what they're looking forward to. Here's Jimmy Thompson.
Well, being a fireman in training, this has been my first trip actually getting to fire the locomotive, and my most awesome opportunity was going over the Petty Y yesterday and just thinking about the Western Pacific trains that went over it and the 2882s and the Challengers that they ran, and thinking about that was my grandfather's generation, and I'm getting to relive history with the big boy going over Petty Y.
I lived in California for 23 years, and I used to come up here at Railfan.
Bring your mic up to the
I lived in California for 23 years before I hired out on the crew, and I used to come up here in Railfan, and I always loved coming up to the Sierras. This is one of my favorite spots, and chased the 844 back in 2012, the last time the Union Pacific had a steam locomotive over this line, and now I'm really looking forward to being, instead of a spectator, being part of the action. Being up in the trees and the smell of the Sierras, it's just, I love it. It's one of my favorite places in the whole world.
I guess I'm really looking forward to going over Donner and that route into Truckee. It's a beautiful stretch of railroad. It's amazing to see the ingenuity and the time and the labor that was took to build the railroads, which built this great nation that we all enjoy every day. And I'm just very grateful to sit back and, you know, think about what it took and the determination that it took to build this country, and something that every person should be proud of. It's an American.
I would say that my favorite part, actually, thus far, would be, you know, I grew up as a Railfan kid in Colorado, and I always loved the UP. The big boys were my favorite when I was a kid. My dad got me a bumper sticker when I was like 5 years old, and it happened to be the 4014, so here I am. But to be able to actually run the locomotive over Sherman Hill up pre-track from Harriman up through the Board, Hermosa, and then down into Laramie, that was pretty cool. There's not many people that can say they've done that in this day and age. So that was a special treat for me to be able to run this over Sherman.
I want to tell just a quick story here and embarrass everybody for a minute. But I'm very, very honored, very privileged to be a part of this operation and to be involved with these very fine people who are very hardworking, very skilled, very dedicated, and extremely passionate. So to have an opportunity to begin helping develop the next step of the process and share things that other people shared with me, and all the little tricks, and there are some little secrets about running a big locomotive, and there's a lot of information. Some of it does not come naturally. So if you can tell someone a little trick here and there, that really helps out. So Austin began his formal training as a locomotive engineer, and he's been making all the required trips running a train. And yes, he does an outstanding job running a regular train. Beautiful. But as part of that training, I will drive and pick him up. He's required to make up 100 miles or so. And so I'm driving through Laramie, Wyoming. I pull over and watch him go by, and I have to tell you, I got a tear in my eye when I saw him go by and stick his head out of the cab. He was very proudly operating that locomotive, blowing the horn perfectly, just by the book. So this is a fun part. It's very fun. This is a special trip. Jimmy's drinking from a fire hose, learning how to fire that engine. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of things behind the scenes. He is the right person to do this. Kurt, John, Austin, they are the right people for this job. The devotion, the skill, the dedication, the passion, the competence that they have on the machine, it's only natural that they are the next generation. And I'm very proud to be a part of it. Sitting behind them, it's a day that I've really looked forward to, and it's exciting. It's really fun up there. Yes, it's a lot of hard work, but it's really fun, and I'm very proud of everything that they're doing. Excellent work.
One last question, then we have to wrap it up. Can you tell me, is this the only tour of 2024?
The question is this the only tour of 4024? We are planning a second trip. We're calling it the Heart of America Tour, and it's going to be a big one. So we're just getting warmed up here. This is just under 3,000 miles traveling this route. The route that we'll be on the road for 57 days, and it's going to be a lot of miles. I'm counting it up on my head, but it's 4,000 miles, and we'll see cities such as Omaha, Council Bluffs, Chicago, St. Louis, Dallas, Little Rock, Houston, Fort Worth, Kansas City, come across Denver. It's really going to be a trip. Yeah, it's kind of the heat of the summer. We always kind of joke amongst ourselves, can't we run this thing in the spring or maybe the fall? Because it's, I mean, look at Kurt. There's this water streaming off of him. I always tell him, Drink water, because if you go down, it's going to take 5 of us to pick you up. So these guys are very tough people, very passionate people, and so very talented, and they do such great work on the locomotive. Just turn around and take a look at that machine, and you can see the hard work that goes into it. And along with that, we've got the others folks back on the train, Bruce and Ted and Garland and Jim Leonard and Brent Malota. But we also have all of our colleagues here helping us. We've got our commissary, we've got the car department here with us, our bosses are here. This is a big production. We've got corporate communications, Robin. She's been with us since we left Cheyenne. So we have her set up in the baggage car. This is a very special privilege for all of us that the Union Pacific would undertake this big project. So thank you for all of them, our CEO, our board of directors, and all of the executives, all the general managers, everybody that puts this together. We're the ones that get the front line credit for it, but there's a heck of a lot of people behind the scenes really pulling strings to make this thing work, and we thank them very much. One last word. How far back from the track do we want to see everybody? We're not going to wave at you. We're not going to smile at you. So please, in all seriousness, 25 feet back at least. Very politely, gently, respectfully tell others, because a lot of people won't be getting our messaging. So we're counting on our friends, everyone in this audience and our friends who can hear this message to help us send the message. We're going to run the big boy, but we're going to do it safe, and that means 25 feet back. We saw a few people do close yesterday, but I'm happy to say it was only a few, and let's keep it that way. Thank you.